You're listening to Breakaway Wealth, the show designed to help you build wealth faster, think bigger, and break out of the herd. Now, here's your host, Jim Oliver.
Welcome back, Breakaway Wealth. I'm your host, Jim Oliver, and with me today, my guest, Todd Fleming, who's a friend of the show. Welcome, Todd.
It feels good to be back. I'm one of the OG guests.
I know you are.
Yeah.
You've been. I don't know what episode that you were, but it was very early on. And
I think I was in the first
here,
five.
Also introduce Harper Jones. Harper is in Knoxville, Tennessee, and is one of the team members that create Tailwind and part of the show for a long time. And so welcome, Harper.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be fun talking with Todd, real estate and infinite banking.
Absolutely. So Todd, just for people that haven't heard you on the show before or don't know you, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background and what you're doing. You have a great story.
Yeah, so I've been full-time in real estate for a decade now, which is kind of wild to think. I'm 35 now, and I came from a background of baseball and majoring in eligibility. Like my whole goal was to play professional baseball. And then when that didn't end up panning out, I basically had to find myself, and I ended up, after trying multiple odd-end different jobs, things like that, and avenues, ended up landing on real estate. Started with my license, got rid of my license because I wanted to be on the investor side, and started my whole career in wholesaling because I didn't have any money. So the first deal I ever closed, I had $11 left. And my first deal closed, I made $7,500. It's the richest I've ever been at $7,500. That's the biggest $7,500 I ever made. And then since then, just been continuously growing and working through. Hey, started with wholesaling, didn't have any money, started to build up some cash, ended up moving into promissory notes. After my wife got pregnant with our first son, with our first child, ended up moving into promissory notes, and then ended up getting into rentals, transitioning from residential to small multifamily, and then multifamily to commercial. And our focus now is larger commercial buildings and specifically medical. We really like medical real estate, so we can go into that if you have any questions about that. But medical real estate is really like where our focus is now.
No, and that's great. And that makes a lot of sense to me because obviously you can order clothes online. You can do a lot of things online, but one thing you can't do is you can't get medical procedures online. You might be able to get medical advice online, but to a limited degree. And when you look at like down here in Southwest Florida, they are building medical buildings left and right.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I'm a big believer when it comes to real estate investment. If it's going to be on the commercial side, anything experience side or just nonstop needed, like you can't, to your point, you're not going to get an operation at the mall. You're not going to get an operation online. So you want to be, you're going to want to be somewhere that has consistent foot traffic. So medical for us. And then honestly, the second best tenant that we look for is animal medical. So veterinarian clinics. And before you question it, before you think like, wait, what? I want you to ask yourself, if you've ever had a pet and you've ever gone to the vet, have you ever had to not wait? You always have to wait. So think about that. If you're on the other end of that, like they're great tenants. So yeah, our focus is fully medical, whether it be human or dog.
Right. As long as it's not a cat. No, I'm just kidding. For all the cat people out there, I'm allergic to cats, so that's why I'm not a cat person. Well, it's one of the reasons.
Hey, Todd, when you're looking for those properties, do you try to find properties with existing tenants, or do you try to find the tenants first and then look for the properties?
So funny. So like the way that I teach, so another big piece of my business and my purpose and my mission is to end financial suffering. That's like my big driver. Like real estate's amazing. And that ended my internal suffering within me and my family. And that was like really my avenue to be able to build capital to pursue my purpose without having to fund it through a traditional job. So my purpose and my mission in life is to end financial suffering for others. So I want to be the greatest teacher that I can be. That way I can help people in their finances. So that's my big driver, right? Now in that, something that I realized was, so what I teach in wholesaling specifically, when people want to start getting into real estate, because I think it's the greatest way to get out of suffering, what I teach in real estate is if you're going to be wholesaling, I want you to go find your buyer first. That way you're always looking for properties for buyers. So it's really interesting that you asked me that question, because we still practice that today, even with the buildings that we're going to buy. So I have really good relationships with people within medical that lease, and they're part of large networks. So I will actually go to them first and say, would you like to lease this building? And if they say yes, I will continue to pursue the building. And if they say no, I either need to find someone else, or I no longer pursue that building, because they're the largest medical network in America. So if they're not willing to lease it, why? Like, what do they know that I don't? So they're able to teach me on that. So having the tenant first, I actually follow that principle, even with our rentals, helps a ton, and it cuts down on vacancy. And you can have leases in place before closing. It can be part of the closing contract. It builds a lot of momentum in your business very, very quickly that way.
Yeah, I like that. Todd, let's back up a little bit, because, one of the things that the original time that you were on the show, and I think you've been on the show a few times, but the original time, I remember you told me a story. So if you're 35 now, you said I was 25 and I had $25 in my pocket or in my bank account. So I deduced that does that mean I'm going to have, when I'm 40, I'm going to have $40 in my checking account?
Oh, you remember that story? You remember that story? Yeah. So I was at that point 24, 25, and I just for specific numbers, when I closed my first deal, I had $11 in my checking account. I'll never forget that number, because before I went to the closing, I was going to have a celebratory coffee. It was above a coffee shop, and I didn't have enough for what I was getting. So I had to check my bank app before actually the closing. And then the closing got delayed till the following Monday. So I had to go the whole weekend with $11. So I'll never forget that. That was implanted into me at that point, or imprinted into me. So the way that I was thinking before that, like when I was at the jobs, when I finally decided I needed to do something different, I needed to act in a different way and think in a different way, was I was sitting in a cubicle at 23, 24, and I had $50 in my account. And I was like, so if I say on this pace, when I'm 50, I'll have $50.
Right.
Like, if I don't change something, like, what will change in my results? So if I'm 50, I'm going to have $50. If I'm 60, I'll have $60. And then I also thought to myself, well, there's also a very good chance that it's actually not that much, because things are going to get worse. So things are going to become more difficult. So that's what really scared me. That was one of the first things that really pushed me towards, no matter what, I am going to do something different. That was a big awareness moment for me.
So what do you think changed? What was the number one thing that changed at that moment?
Okay, I was sitting in my cubicle. I remember the guy I was sitting across from. His name's Greg. Great dude. I feel terrible that I did this to him. Greg, if you're listening, I love you. I'm sorry. I was sitting in my cubicle, and I heard in my head, your financial struggles are not your employer's fault. And when I heard that, it hit me, because I had been making all the excuses that so many people do of like, oh, I don't get paid enough, they don't provide enough, this, that, like it's always the company's fault, right? So in sitting in the cubicle, I heard that, and I looked up, and Greg's eyes were directly above the cubicle. Like, if you're listening to audio, I just have my hands up to like directly below my eyes. So just a vision like the guy, you know what I mean? Like with the headset on. And this is, and I'm coming from a background like where I wanted to play professional baseball. So I had all these dreams, and I looked at him and I said, how did I end up sitting next to you? And he just looked at me like he's on the phone with a client or a customer, like and his eyes just light up. And I was like, I was just at a complete loss at that point. And that was the moment that I walked out of the building, and I never walked back up those steps. That was the moment that I decided that no matter what, I was going to do this or I was going to die. That was literally how committed I was at that point, because I was in so much financial and emotional pain that I had to do something different. I knew there was something better out there for me. And then it was a year of struggling, not making a single dime, and then getting the ball rolling after that, and then discovering, wholesaling and real estate and really building that out.
So what I love about that story, Todd, is that there are people out there right now that are sitting there And there's a million people out there that want to be in real estate, and they're at some point in that decision-making process. They haven't changed their thinking, but you weren't interested, you were committed, right? And that's a difference. And I want to pivot that into like how you got into teaching, and what you do now, and kind of like what services you offer. Because it's cool, and there's a lot of people out there in real estate and what's going on in the market and everything else, but getting somebody from stationary to action is it's everything. Because once you're in motion, then it's how fast you're in motion, what direction you're going in, and we can talk about all of that. But I want to talk to the people that are sitting there in that cubicle right now. We're sitting there in that 2,000 square foot office, because you can still be just as stuck in that 2,000 square foot office. But talk a little bit about that, Todd.
Yeah, so financial suffering so my mission is to end financial suffering. So it's funny that you mentioned the 2,000 square foot office, because most people think financial suffering is this, I'm either poor or I don't make enough, or I'm poor or I don't make enough. But that's not the truth. What in reality is, the person in a 2,000 square foot corner office can be in as much financial suffering as someone who doesn't make enough money. So think about any professional athlete that goes broke. They don't actually know money. They don't actually understand wealth. They don't actually understand finance and how to handle things well and provide for others. They just have a really, really high income, really, really high, essentially W-2 paying job, right? And then when that job goes away, you see guys struggle. The same thing with lottery winners. How does a lottery winner go broke when they win $150 million? Well, it's simple. The government takes half and then they spend the other half, and then they're right back to where they started, because they don't actually increase any financial literacy. So I'm a big believer for the person, if you're sitting there right now in the cubicle, if you're unfulfilled, if you're unhappy, one, you're not alone. So a lot of that time that feels lonely. So you're listening to someone or watching someone right now who was like that and made a huge change, huge shift, and completely changed their life in less than 12 months. So it's very possible. It also takes less time than you think. But motivation is not real, but momentum is. So right now you're afraid and worried and frankly terrified to take that next step because of the what if it doesn't work, or what if this happens, or what if that happens. When in reality, if you just take that step, all of that fear will go away. You have to take a physical action step. All that fear will go away, because internally in your brain will go from filling the unknown with fear, because that's how you survive, to it'll switch and it'll go to exploration. And you can't be scared, you can't be fearful and exploring at the same time. So your brain will choose exploring. So if you just take a physical action step, you will literally feel better. You'll get a little dopamine hit, and then your brain will want more of that. So you can change your direction overnight. You won't get to where you want overnight, more than likely, depending on what you want. I guess it's possible it's that you could, but you can change your family tree's direction literally overnight by making a decision and taking a singular action step. So if you're the person that's stagnant right now, all you have to do is take that first movement. That's it. And your brain will switch. You'll move from fear to exploration. I promise. That's how you crush fear.
I really like that. Action cures fear is what the book, The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. So I got to tell you a funny story. When I was, 22, 23, and I'm living in Louisville, Colorado. That way people in Louisville know that I didn't mispronounce that. They call it Louisville in Colorado. And I'm looking to buy this house from this guy, and I pull up to the house, and here's this guy's got long hair, raggedy beard. I am in Boulder County, so just kind of imagine that with me. Ripped shirt, he's painting, got stuff all over him. And I said, "Hey, do you know where the owner is?" He goes, "Oh, I'm the owner." And I said, "Oh, okay. So you own this house?" "Yeah. This, it was a rental. I'm going to sell it. I've got these rentals, these rentals, these rentals." And I'm like, this guy's got all this stuff. This guy. So I said, "Hey, and he was probably in his 40s. And I asked him something like, "How did you get all these properties?" And, and he started explaining it to me. And I said, "Well, where did you start? And he said that he described like you're standing on the bank of a river, and on the other side of the river is everything that you want. And he said the secret is you got to jump in the river to get to the other side, because as soon as you jump in the river, just like you said, you're not going to let yourself drown. Now you're in that exploration process, like, oh crap, how do I get to the other side of the river? Right? I mean, even if I can't swim, I can grab a log and I can float to the other side, or whatever I got to do, I can somehow I got to get to the other side of the river. But you won't ever get to the other side of the river unless you're in the river. So I love that. I love that you recognize that, and you did that actually, I think, at an early age. A lot of people wait for a long time, and I don't want to say they're paralyzed, but fear paralyzes us. That's why action is the only thing that can cure fear. And so, the thing that I also like, Todd, is that you learn how to do this on your own, and then you're sharing with people how you did it. So talk about ending financial suffering and teaching people financial literacy and how money really works. Talk about how you do that now.
Okay, so in the beginning, when I was, again, full transparency, solving my financial suffering, like that's what real estate did for me in the beginning, right? So in the beginning of that, when I was working through that, it was fulfilling to a point. Like money will be fulfilling to a point. Now, when I reached a point in which I wasn't getting the same level of fulfillment or excitement out of the next deal, that's also when other people around you will notice that something's different, because you're no longer in the same financial suffering that people normally are. And they go, hey, what's different? Or how'd you do it? Or they start asking questions. And if a question is asked, the mind is typically open. Okay. So what happened was I've solved my financial suffering, my family's financial suffering. And then I had a couple people ask me, a couple close friends, like, hey, what are you doing different? Like, how'd you do this? So I challenged myself. I was like, what if I taught them? I wonder if it would work for them. So I taught them what I knew and what I had done and what worked for me. And I just worked with them privately. No payment, anything like that. They're close friends. And it worked for both of them. I was like, okay. And then I saw the light go off in them or turn on in them. And then they went off and they created, what made sense for them. So that was really cool to see. So then I did it with a few more people, a handful of people at a time. And then it worked for all of them. Okay, so might be onto something here that actually works. And then after that, I just started growing into, okay, how can I, instead of affecting 5 people, how can I help 10? And then instead of helping 10, how can I help 30? If I could help 30, how could I help 50? And then it became, okay, if I'm not here to teach it at this exact moment, how can I do it in a way that they will still get the benefit? So that's when I started recording things. I started making actual content and courses and things like that. And then people started getting great results. It's actually how Harper and I originally met, was through course creation and content creation and courses that were available, and him coming into a community that I was a part of. So at that point, I start to see momentum in other people. That's when I really realized, which I think is the true key here to understanding, is you do not find your purpose. People are like, well, if I could just find my purpose. You don't find your purpose, you develop it. It's totally different. I thought once I got good at real estate, I was like, my purpose is real estate. I now realize that it has nothing, it's obviously a key in my purpose. It's a driver. It's a vehicle in which I can use for my purpose. But my purpose is to end financial suffering, because over time I realized it wasn't someone getting their first deal that was so exciting. It wasn't someone getting their 5th deal or their 10th deal. It was the person that could retire their wife. It was the person that could walk away from the job. It was the person that would come to me and go, dude, I've never had 10 grand in the bank, or 50 grand or 100 grand or 250 grand. Like, they literally built up savings and they were able to invest in different things. They're like, I don't have to check my bank app before I go to the grocery store. Like that is the one that hit me the most, and always. So that's when I recognized, it's not the real estate side. It's actually the financial side, and solving the financial side that's creating a lot of fulfillment. And it just continues to be that driver. And as I started to build it out on a larger and larger scale, the better it was, and the quicker people would move. and the more benefit people would get. So it was like, that became like, that's how the purpose came to be and the mission came to be. So it started 10 years ago, and I just thought it was real estate. And over the past handful of years, especially, like, it took me 4 or 5 years to realize that. So over the past 4 or 5 years, my mission has shifted, from real estate to really the financial side, but using the vehicle of real estate, because I do continue to believe that it is the absolute best vehicle possible to end your financial suffering, and for now and the long term, no matter where you're at.
So, you said a lot there, Todd, but I want to unpack a couple of things. One is, I like that, when we talk to people at Create Tailwind about infinite banking, and we talk about buying assets, and we're showing them, everybody that's talking about infinite banking online, they want to talk about the insurance contract and how to design the insurance contract. And, there's only these companies for the insurance contract. And it's such ignorance, because it's a tool. The real estate is an asset, right? I mean, there are a lot of different assets that you could buy. But why do you want to buy assets? Why do you want to control the banking function in your life? Why is combining those two things together absolutely help the velocity that you're going to build your wealth? But it's the goal. The goal is not retirement. The goal is not all of these old concepts that people are still clinging to in scarcity mindsets. It's abundance, and it's having more than you need so that you can share it with other people, with your community, with you can bless other people's lives. But, so I like that you're talking about that, because we could talk about real estate and what's going on in real estate and everything else, but it's really the mindset and the way you think that matters. And if you don't have the right mindset, then you won't take the action. If you don't take the action, then you're not going to get, and I love how you said the exploration phase. And so, I love that that's your change in the last 4 or 5 years. So let me ask you a question. So let's say somebody's in the audience, and I don't care if they're 25 or 75. They say, you know what, Todd, I want to learn more about Todd. I want to learn more about, like, how do you coach people? How do you help people? Tell me what you have going on there now, because I know there's some cool stuff going on.
Yeah, so I was feeling called to be more in the public space. That's why I've made the changes that I have in the past, 6 to 12 months. So a lot of what I'm doing is on YouTube now, which is really exciting. So that was again, goes back to my mission. My mission is to end financial suffering, right? So if my mission is to end financial suffering, I have to touch 7 to 8 billion people somehow. So I have to be on a platform that they're already on that's free. So YouTube was the answer to that. So we have a lot of focus, and we're all in on that. So we have a podcast called Financial Favor, and I run that podcast with my niece, Aisley, which is actually a really cool dynamic, because we got 2 different generations. We have 2 different genders, and we're having really, really cool conversations about how money works for her, how money works for us, how money works for me, and like how that dynamic works. So like we have that side of, if you're a part of a younger generation, you're a 19-year-old girl, and you don't have someone to talk to and trust about money, or a male figure in your life, like that's why the podcast is there. It is to move people, from financial suffering to stability, and then stability to thriving. So that's a piece that we're all in on for sure. So the YouTube channel, it's just my name, Todd Michael Fleming, but the podcast is called Financial Favor. And then for coursework, more intimate work, we have a number of different courses, ranging from wholesale to cash flow to financial literacy. So they're all based on the books that I have out. So I have a couple books that have been out for multiple years. I have a 3rd book coming out very, very soon. So this is becoming a lot. You're like, how many projects does this guy have? Many. Okay. So, but the beautiful part about that is when you declutter your soul, right, you end up having a lot of more capacity, and you get really excited for the things that you're doing. So you don't have that same level of exhaustion. So we have a lot going on, but yeah, you can discover more at toddmfleming.com. So you can pick which course makes the most sense for you. You'll be able to join our private community that way. You can interact directly with us. And if you have questions, whether it be on real estate or finance or mindset or just whatever you have going on in your life, you're going to be around a group of people that really want to help move you forward, which is the important piece to me.
Todd, I have a question for you. when you had started wholesaling and getting some more income, I'm sure that was a great feeling. You had a period of time with that where you're like, this is awesome. But then when did you transition to buying cash flowing assets to replace your income so you didn't have to go to work for the check every day?
I remember the second deal we ever closed. We had 10 grand in the bank, and my wife and I. So we have two celebrations. We have a couple different celebrations, right? So every time we do a deal, have a success or a win, we celebrate it, right? And our big one is going to Macaroni Grill. Okay, we're very fancy like that. All right, so no matter how much money we have, we're going to Macaroni Grill. So I remember after our second deal, we went to Macaroni Grill. We had 10 grand in the bank, and I remember walking through that place, going, "Who else got 10 grand in this place? Huh? Yeah, I'm probably the richest person here." Unbelievable. So like it went from that mindset after the second deal ever, because it was so exciting and so new and so novel, to when we got pregnant with our first child. He's 7 now. We had just been wholesaling for a couple of years at that point. Again, stacking money, to your point, like just discovering that we're actually just high income earners. We weren't actually building a business per se. We were just self-employed, but being paid really well. So when she got pregnant with him, she had what's called hyperemesis. So basically, long story short, you can't eat or drink when you're pregnant, which is kind of required. So she ended up in the hospital a bunch of times, and I wasn't able to work the same hours that I was. That is when it switched in our heads of like, oh, we can't just keep earning money. We have to have it show up when we're not working too. So that's when I transitioned to continuing to wholesale, but instead of taking that next $10,000 assignment fee or the next $10,000 check, since it wasn't going to change our lives, I started taking it as promissory notes. So that way the money would come in slower over time, and also it would grow because there was an interest rate involved. So I would take my notes, or I would take my fees as promissory notes. That way I could build some consistency and stop starting at zero every single month. And then we transitioned from notes to rentals after Wyatt was born.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, good question. Harper, another question?
Let's see here. I think that, when you're building out the rentals and the properties, you can still make it a little bit of a job. How do you make it more of a business so you can remove yourself as much as possible? And maybe that's part of going into medical and commercial.
Oh, man, that's absolutely part of it. But two, real estate can be a horrific job if you have rentals. If you don't understand the business side. So you have a piece of real estate, okay, that is considered an asset, right? But many times that asset actually takes from you, so it actually turns into a liability. An asset doesn't become an asset until you learn how to extract wealth from it, okay? And that doesn't just mean money. That means time, that means opportunity, that means options, that means equity, that means all of it, right? So you have to be able to measure that. And then the second piece is there is a business inside of that piece of real estate. There is a business inside that quote unquote asset, right? So what you have to do is you have to understand both. You want to be able to buy value at a discount. Just to keep numbers super simple. If you have a $100,000 property and you know it's worth $100,000, you know the area, you have either comparables or you have a realtor that you trust that's saying like, hey, this thing's worth $100,000 and you can buy it for 70. Congratulations. You just bought value at a discount. You're going to have a tough time losing if that's the case. Okay, so that's the first step. The first step, you buy value at a discount. The second step is if you want your life to get better with it, you have to be able to ask yourself the question, if I had 50 more of these, what would my life look like? And if the answer is anything but positive, you have to change something immediately because you're on the wrong road. So if you have 6 single family rentals, but you're managing them yourself, you're going to pick up the checks yourself, you're mowing them yourself, like you're doing all of the hard work yourself, you recognize like, oh, if I had 50 more of these, my life would I'd be in shambles. So that's obviously not going to work. So that comes down to the business side of real estate and understanding how to rent and lease something well. Like, how does your background check look? How does your credit check look? How does your interview process look? What does your actual lease look like? Like, who drew it up? Are proper expectations being set? And the best part about this is most people like, well, I'll never know how to do that, so I don't want to get into real estate. Nobody knows how to do it the first 10 times they do it. You learn from the first one. Now you can get help. You can be part of a community that helps. You can be part of an education program that helps. You can have a mentor. You can have an attorney draw up your lease. You can have a title company. You can have anybody experienced around you help with that first initial process. But understanding the difference between the real estate itself and the business within it is what will actually give you the opportunity to set you free, because over time you'll recognize, all right, the only thing that really takes from me from this property is that I get, 2 calls every other week. Well, you don't have to handle the call. That could be management. You could build a hub. You could build your own management. There's a number of ways. You can have somebody that is part-time and they handle the phones, and then they just message whoever needs to handle that problem. Like, there's a number of ways to go about it, but you only figure that out by starting. Like, you can't predict the future and be like, this is the problem I'm going to have. You have to have the problem and then fix it.
Yeah. And that's where I think education is so important with anything in life, right? Except maybe university education is not that important. But like when you're talking about real estate and infinite banking, people want to get in real estate. I'm like, yes, you need to get started, but like get educated first. So you're making wiser moves and taking wiser actions. And same thing with infinite banking. Some people are like, hey, let's look at an illustration. Let's go ahead and get a policy. And it's like, well, we need to understand, the process of infinite banking and get comfortable with it and see it at a conceptual level before we even look at numbers. And it's the same thing with real estate. If we showed you a great deal on paper, it's like, do you even know what you're looking at, right? You got to be educated to be able to get there. You got to invest in yourself first. I
am a huge believer in that. Whatever money you have right now. So this is also why my education is structured the way that it is. If you are in debt, dead broke, and you don't know where lunch is coming from, guess what? The YouTube channel is there for you. Go watch it. Go listen to the podcast, and it will be able to get you to a point where you can buy a book. And the book's $15 to $20. Now you can learn a brand new skill set for $15 that can literally pay you forever, right? So that's the switch. So it goes from free, if you got $15, go buy a book. If you got $100, guess what? Now you can be part of the community. Like, I am a huge believer in whatever you have available to you today. The first thing you should do is put a strong portion of it into your self-education and self-improvement and go learn something new, learn a new skill set from somebody. Because if you have $100, go give somebody that $100 and go, teach me something. And take that teach me something and go do it. And it's going to make you $1,000, or it's going to make you $10,000 or $5,000. So you're going to have 100x return, 10 to 100x return on this first skill that you learn. And then what's great about that is you take that 5 or 10 grand or $1,000, whatever it makes you, and you go to the next person and you go, teach me something. That's why we have courses at $1,000. You can be a part of a community and learn something brand new. It's super in depth that you'll be able to take with you forever. That $1,000 is going to make you 100 grand. That 100 grand, then you can then put into yourself. Like, anything you put into yourself is going to get an exponentially higher return than anything outside of you. So I can put money into a piece of real estate and get 12, 14, 20, 30%, like, very likely, right? Especially when you add in equity and tax benefits and all the benefits of it, you can earn a lot. But if I put that money into me, oh man, I've put hundreds of thousands of dollars into my self-education. And I started with a book. That's it. Like, I bought a handful of books because I had $50 at the time. So I bought a handful of books, and then I bought my first course. And then I was a part of my first community. Then I bought my first private-ish coaching for like $5 grand. And then the $5 grand went to 30 grand, and 30 grand went to 55 grand, and 55 grand went to 100 grand, up to $250,000. All of those things have returned to me exponentially higher than any outside investment I've ever made. And that's how I've been able to make millions of dollars each year for the past, handful of years.
So I love that. That was great, Todd. Thank you for that answer and that explanation. So you mentioned some books. One of the things that we like to do as we're wrapping up here is we like to ask everyone, and I know I've already asked you this question, but I'm just going to ask it again, and hopefully you give us a different book than I don't remember the last book.
I was about to say, I got to give you a different book this time. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, you can give the same book. It's kind of funny because you could give the same advice one year and then give exactly the same advice the next year. Some people that heard you the first time didn't hear it. And so, that old gig, but if God came down from heaven, Todd, and only allowed you to retain the knowledge that you've received from one book, what would that book be?
Oh boy. Well, is this outside the Bible then? Because that's like, if God's coming down.
I normally clarify
because it's actually all in. It's actually all in there. So one of the reasons people ask me, "Hey, how do you have such a good relationship with your wife?" Harper can attest to this. Like, me and Denise have an unbelievable relationship. And how have you done so well in business? I was open enough for her to teach me about God, and she was open enough for her to let me teach her about money. So we were able to combine those two things. So starting to understand and recognizing that everything's actually in the Bible is unbelievable. So, but if I had to pick one book, and I'm only allowed to pick one book outside of that, it would be Richest Man in Babylon with zero hesitation. I base all of my financial decisions off that book.
You know what's funny, Todd, is 35 years ago, I guess when you were born, 1988.
I was about to say, 1987?
In 1988, I got in this business of helping people with their money. The first 15 years misguided as a fee-based financial planner, getting assets under management for Wall Street. But I used to hand that book out to people. I used to buy boxes of that book and hand it out to people. And I would agree with you. It's a great book. But you said something more important. I mean, that is a book that everyone should read. Every 13-year-old or older should read that book. But you said something that is absolutely true. One of my favorite books, I have lots of favorite books, but one of them is how we wrap up this show, and it's The Strangest Secret. But everything in The Strangest Secret is in the Bible, right? Because he says the strangest secret is whatever you think about, you become. And whatever you plant in your brain, that's what will grow. Well, in the Bible, it says, guard your heart, because your heart becomes your thoughts become your actions, right? Now, I know that I could probably quote that the way that it's supposed to be in the Bible, but I'm not. I'm more of a conceptual person and visionary than I am literal and detailed. So if my wife was here right now, she would be able to give you the exact paragraph, the number, the line, everything. Yeah, she's unbelievable with that. I'm like, do you have the book with you right now? Yeah. Like, how did you do that? It's incredible. You know, outside John 3:16, I'm not sure how many verses I can quote word for word, and I guess it depends on the version, right? But I agree with you. Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People. All of these books, it's all in the Bible, and that's so cool. And if you read the Bible, or you do a devotional every day, or you do something, you'll start to see that pattern, which helps you realize that these truths are the truth. So as we're wrapping up, thank you very much. Thank you, Harper, for being on, and Todd, thank you for being a friend of the show and a client. And I'm really impressed that you are passionate about helping people change their financial futures and how quickly you changed yours. And I want you to think about that if you're sitting in the audience. I don't care if you're 70 years old. Okay, that means by the time you're 75, you could be in a lot better position than you are now. And if you're 20 years old, hey, even better. So
yeah, I have guys that I've worked with that are 75 that changed things very quickly because they have a lot of wisdom.
I've had people in their 80s start infinite banking, and obviously we didn't put the insurance on them, but they started to get that mindset, and they were business owners, and they're thinking, how do I teach the people in my family, the younger generation, about money? And they're still at 80-some years old trying to give back to their family, community, etc. So, again, thank you so much. Harper, thank you for being on and helping and being my co-host today. So we're going to wrap this up, audience, like we do every show, with the incredible words of Earl Nightingale. So take it away, Earl.
Here's the key to success and the key to failure. We become what we think about. Now let me say that again. We become what we think about.
Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to hear what was shared on today's podcast. If you are looking to discover new wealth building strategies, then go to community.createtailwind.com. That's community.createtailwind.com to join our free online community and get access to free courses and in-depth training videos designed to help you build wealth and break away from the herd. Click the link in the show notes to access the community today. Thanks again for listening.